haven't been on live for several days now. And I want to come on live this evening to do a couple of things. One, I want to, first of all, thank the good people at Marshall University, Mr. Professor Bernice Morris and Dr. Monisette uh, Miller, for sponsoring a spectacular symposium celebrating a milestone, the centennial anniversary of Carter G. Woodson's amazing Black History Week, which was expanded to Black History Month. They had an incredible program on the campus of Marshall University on March the 5th, and then they brought the event to the Charleston area on March the 6th. On Friday the 6th in the morning, they were up at Malden at the Booker T. Washington Church, and they did a tour up there of the Dickinson salt mines. And then my friend Attorney Larry Rowe gave a magnificent performance, or I should say a presentation, on the life and the work of Booker T. Washington. And then in the afternoon, we were on the campus of West Virginia State University. And we'd like to thank President Eric Cage and West Virginia State University for hosting the Friday, March the 6th session on the campus of Western State University. Marvelous, incredible event there. I was privileged to be able to give the keynote address, plenary address for the session on Friday afternoon at 1 o'clock p.m. Then they had a couple of amazing workshop with some scholars from Marshall, from Western State University, and scholars also from out of the state. And then on Saturday, they had more workshops done on the campus of Western State University, and then they concluded with an incredible, and absolutely incredible, and an amazing lecture and concert by my younger sister, Dr. Ollie Watts Davis, and 20 or 25 of the choice voices of the University of Illinois' Black Chorus. And it was amazing. My sister's tremendously gifted, talented, well trained, professional classical soloist, soprano vocalist, but she's also a historian of Black sacred music. And she gave an incredible lecture on Black sacred music and then the choir, and she also sung some songs. For those who were unable to get down to Marshall University for the concert, you can view the concert on my Facebook page, Matthew J. Watts Facebook. It's a few posts down. And then I also have it posted on my YouTube channel, Pastor Watts YouTube. I think the Pastor Watts YouTube taping is better. I have a better phone that I tape live on YouTube with, and YouTube just seems to do a better job in terms of how it records and organizes. So you can go to Pastor Watts YouTube and view the entire concert that was held at West Virginia State University. I'm sorry, at Marshall University this past Saturday, March the 7th. And also, you can go to my YouTube channel, Pastor Watts YouTube, or Matthew J. Watts Facebook, and you can listen to and view the presentation I made at West Virginia State University on this past Friday also. So we appreciate that. Tyler Metz, I thank you for tuning in this evening. He's our first senior rep on the Rand University documentary. That is correct. That's been several years ago, but I guess that is my claim to fame. The one time I made a national TV program that I was interviewed when they did the incredible piece on Randy Moffat at Rand University. Tag a few people. I want to talk a little bit tonight about some of my observations in terms of what's happening in our community, particularly among the generations of younger African American leaders and those of us who are older, and many of us in the twilight years of our ministry in our community service. And what I hope to do is to be a source of encouragement, a source of counsel when needed, and to share my opinions. But I'm certainly trying to not get in the way of the emerging young leaders. I'm very careful to not criticize what they do. I do feel like that God still has something for me to say in terms of trying to help shape a narrative of how we should respond to certain things. But I do believe it's time now for the emerging group of young leaders to step on the scene, to assume their place, to put their ideas in the public square, to cast their vision in terms of where they think people should go, and then to see who willing to line up behind them and support them. So tag a few people. I think what I'm going to say tonight could be helpful. It's certainly not intended to be critical, nor does it tend to be divisive. It's merely the observation of a 70-year-old preacher who knows that he's past his prime, but still believes that God has something for him to say. And sometimes, as a thought leader, it's just a matter of putting the thought into the public square and then letting people decide whether the thought has any merit or any value. As I shared at Washington State University this past week, I believe that leadership has four main responsibilities that they must continue to realize that it's a responsibility that they have if they consider themselves to be a thought leader. First of all, I believe that a leader has to have a clear and an accurate narrative of where we've been in the past. Where have we come from and where we are? I think it's responsibility of leaders to be custodians of the history and always clearly laying out, here's where we've been, here's where we've come from, and here's what has brought us to where we are. Secondly, I believe the leader has a responsibility to lay out, Brother Hugh Holler, a clear narrative of where we are now. A leader should be able to clearly to define in his or her own words the reality of the challenges that we face. What are we up against now? Thirdly, I think the leader has a responsibility to cast a clear vision of a desired future. Where is it that we want to go? And what would it look like? And why do we want to go there? And then fourthly, I believe that the leader has a responsibility to lay down a clear and a concise strategy narrative of here is the strategy and here are the steps that'll move us in the direction of that desired future. Those are four main things I think a leader has to do: a clear, accurate narrative of the past, where we've been, a clear, accurate narrative of where we are now, what is the reality, a clear vision of what is the desired future, where do we want to go and why do we want to go there, and a clear strategic narrative, a plan as to how we get there. That's what I try to do. That's why I'm on Facebook. I'm trying to lay down these clear narratives. Here's what Reverend Matthew J. Watts the first thinks, and he's only speaking most of the time for himself, occasionally for the Tuesday morning group, and as a pastor, I speak as the thought leader for the Grace Bible Church, the primary thought leader and the primary spokesperson. So let me share something that I see happening. I've been following some of the conversation on Facebook. I know there's a little bit of tension, and there's some expression of some passion and some concern regarding where the plan is going with the upcoming Juneteenth observance scheduled for June of this year. I commend all of those who've been the custodians of the Juneteenth planning. They've had several very, very successful, beneficial, and events that have been a blessing to the community. I'm not part of that committee. I'm not a consultant of that group. I have no hand in it other than to pray for them, encourage them and try to enjoy the events, which I did last year and the year prior. But as an observer, it's obvious to me that there is some concern and some frustration, and maybe some of the younger people don't feel like that they are being heard, and maybe the older people don't feel like the younger people are listening close enough and attentively enough. And so sometimes we're not communicating. We're talking past each other and not really talking to each other and listening to each other. I'm not saying dogmatically that's the case, but that might be the case. I want to share a bit of insight I think that may be of some benefit, both younger, middle-aged, and older people. We must understand that our lived experience, what we've been through, what we've seen, what we witness, it shapes how we interpret the present, how we interpret present situations or present circumstances. And I don't think we talk about that enough, that younger people and older people can look at the same thing and see something differently. The younger people and older people can look at the same thing and think that there are different ways to get somewhere, and in some cases, they have a different vision of where it is that we should be trying to go. And I think that's part of the situation here. It doesn't make either the younger wrong, it doesn't make the older right. It just means that there's a different lens through which we are receiving and interpreting things. So let me share something that may be helpful. I'm 70 years old, right? And I think the 70 is kind of a magic number. It's not only a magic number because the Bible talks about that God promises 70 as an average life expectancy in this particular time frame. But in where we are historically now, 70, I think, is a number that really defines anyone 70 years old and 70 years and older. They're going to look at the world a certain way because of their lived experiences. And even people that are 67, 65, they will look at the world a little bit differently from people that are 70 because there's some significant lived experiences that they didn't have. So let me tell you what I mean by that. I was 7 years old, at 6 years of age, 1962, and I started school. So I started school in Fayette County, segregated schools, because in southern West Virginia, they chose not to desegregate or integrate schools at the elementary school level. So our children in Charleston and in other parts of the state were going to integrated schools. In 62, we were still going to segregated schools and went to segregated elementary schools up until 1966. So that's a lived experience that I had that would be different from people that are younger than me. Right? Secondly, when we moved into the public housing in 1963, it was segregated by race. It remained segregated until about 74, maybe, or 75. When my mother moved out in 1973, the public housing in Mount West Virginia was still segregated by race. And so segregated schools, segregated in terms of housing, and we lived in segregated neighborhoods. Okay, so while people in Charleston and other parts of the state, they were experiencing more of an integration. That's a different lived experience at a young age. When I was 7 years old in 1963, Medgar Evers, a famous civil rights leader, was murdered in Mississippi. I remember that. I remember my mother and my grandmother talking about that because he was so popular. So I was kind of marked by the assassination of this popular civil rights leader. I was 7 years old in 1963 when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. I remember exactly what I was doing when we got the news in the afternoon on November 22nd, when we came in after the afternoon recess and was told by the third grade teacher that the president had been shot. At the time, she was not sure whether he was alive or dead. That shaped everybody that was born at that time. If you were younger than 7, you're 5 or 6, you probably won't remember that. But if you were 7, 8, you will. You're shaped by that. 1965, right? 1964. I was 8 years old when the 1964 Civil Rights Bill was passed. And I heard them talk about what that would do and how it's supposed to result in desegregation, integration, and things like that. I was 9 years old in 1965 when the Voting Rights Act was passed. I was 9 years old in 1965 when Malcolm X was assassinated, right? I was 12 years old in 1968 when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. You see, so someone that is 70 years old, what we experience and witness in terms of segregation, schools, public housing, this whole idea of civil rights, and those type things. It shapes the way I look at things. It shapes the fact that I have a sense of urgency about certain things because I'm saying I'm now 70 and all this time has passed, and what I'm witnessing is a reversal. And I talked about that at Western State University. I talked about we went from 1964 Civil Rights Act, 1965 Voting Rights Act, 1968 Fair Housing Act. We went to move into affirmative action, equal employment opportunity, managing diversity, equity, and inclusion. So from 1968 to 2024, during that period of time, there were opportunities that were opened up for blacks to go to college, get better employment opportunities, better training, and so forth, right? The hope of progress and things getting better. Then in 2024, with the election of the current 47th President of the United States and the governor of the state, Now we see a national and a statewide trend, a pushback on anything that looks like civil rights, anything that looks like diversity, equity, and inclusion, anything that looks like equal employment opportunity. That's what I've been trying to define, that people don't understand how aggressive at the federal level with the new president, at the state level with the governor and with the legislature, they're trying to push back much of the progress and gains that have been made. That's the reality of where we are. To where now it's illegal for K through 12 education, illegal for higher education, illegal for state government, and private companies are sort of capitulating to what the president and the governor are saying, is they're moving away from a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So as a 70-year-old man who was 6 years old starting segregated school in 62, right, who was 8 years old with Civil Rights Act of 64, 9 years old with the Voting Rights of 65, 9 years old when Malcolm X was killed, 7 years old when John Fitzgerald Kennedy was killed, 12 years old when Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy were killed, who saw all of this and also was moving into high school and then into college in the early 70s and saw the opportunities for Pell Grants and for BOEG grants and opportunities to go to college, and saw companies like Union Carbide and Dow and FMC and Monsanto and Post Office, other people open opportunities for African Americans. I witnessed all of that. And what I'm trying to get people to realize, now in 1 year, there's an attempt to shut the door on progress, on opportunity for African American people in West Virginia and around the country, and for other minority groups. And so that's what I've been trying to help people understand where we really are. And I don't think people understand it. And it's not until this generation of younger parents who have children in college, and as they start to graduate over the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, and they're going to find that the type of job and employment opportunities that they thought that their children would have are not going to be there. There will be no pressure from the federal government to these companies to get all these government contracts to have any type of program that will promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not going to happen. The state government will have no program to promote equal employment opportunity. The federal government will have no program to promote equal employment opportunity. I don't think people really understand that and understand the wall that we're getting ready to run into, but it's getting ready to happen. And then I think the reality will set in that we really need to be talking to each other. We really need to be trying to figure out how we can work together. How do we prepare our children to be more competitive? How do we help them develop the resiliency that they need? Because they're going to have to scrap, and they're going to have to scrape, and they're going to have to work hard, and they're going to be denied opportunities sometime. They're going to have to get better and improve and sharpen their skills. Because I heard someone say this past week, that excellence, right, is a fundamental strategy of resistance, right? So I'm trying to define the reality of where we are. And I'm hoping that maybe some of my comments will help the younger generation, middle-aged generation, older people realize we need to come together, not just on Zoom, not just on Facebook Live. We need to come together in rooms and in meetings, look at each other in the eye, listen to each other, try to understand each other, try to feel where we're coming from each other, and then say, how can we work together? How can we find common ground to move together something that's going to be for the common good of our people? And I do believe that the Juneteenth observance could be one such opportunity to do that. Without being critical, is my opinion, and I have a tendency to be wrong, but I'm not sure that just merely bringing in big-time speakers and paying them large sums of money to talk about something that may or may not be germane to what we're dealing with, and then they leave with the money, but we have no plan, no plan or ideas as to how we can move things forward. I think we do need to think about how do we maximize this opportunity to use whatever resources we have that's going to result in us having something specific, something tangible in terms of how we can possibly move some things forward. So I'm just going to encourage the people that are involved in that process, really listen to what the young people are saying. Ask them to write their ideas down on paper. My late friend, but he would always tell me, the palest ink is sharper than the brightest mind. Now, what does that mean? What he was saying is, if you write something down with an ink pen, even if it fades somewhat, but if you can still see the image of what was written down, it will be sharper than your mind, which you may not be able to recall everything that you were thinking at any given time. I think it's time for us to start writing our ideas down so that we detangle our thoughts out of our minds through our thought processes, through our fingers, and then we can read our ideas for ourselves, and then others can do the same. And I would strongly encourage those who are working together to put the plan together for the Juneteenth observance to maybe consider doing that. The other thing briefly I want to share is that you remember the statement, one of the most quoted statements of Martin Luther King Jr. is that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We see it written on cards, we see it written on posters, it's often quoted. King's supposedly is the author of that statement, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I tend to agree with that. I tend to agree that injustice anywhere is a potential threat to justice everywhere because one injustice can be built upon uh, to promote another injustice, and then you end up with a tsunami of injustices against a certain group of people. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going to go back to something that Brother Melvin Shepherd, I've seen him comment on this before. It's what I believe to be an injustice against the youth football teams of Dunbar and Charleston, the Dunbar Bulldogs and the Charleston Cougars. They continue to be excluded from participating in the Appalachian Youth Football Conference. Now, some of you think, well, what? That's not a big deal. That's just football, right? That's just football. Well, if you take that position, then I think you're missing a major point. Youth sports is incredibly important to children, the cheerleaders, the football players, to the young parents. Youth sports is more than just a football game or basketball game. It's a pillar in our community. It becomes one of the first organized entities where young parents bring their young children together and they start developing social relationships. They have shared experiences. They develop a solidarity. They're pulling together to win, the pride of winning. They share the pain of defeat. And because in youth sports, the children start at early ages, 5 and 6 years of age, and they may be engaged from 5 or 6 years of age up into their 11 or 12. So that means there's 5, 6 years where these young parents, cheer parents, football parents are together. And that can build lifelong friendships, both for the children and for the parents. But it also gives a solidarity for the community, something for grandma and aunts and uncles and friends, all to feel a part of something together, shared experience. Historically, sports has played that role at the youth level, the junior high, middle school level, high school level, college level, and professional level, and it plays that role today all over the country of bringing people together. That's why I believe it is an injustice for Dunbar and Charleston to be targeted, to be excluded from the leagues. So I'm appealing, first of all, to those who are making the decision. And it's just a few board members on the Appalachian Youth Football Conference League. They're making that decision. I think they owe it to the parents and the youth of Dunbar and Charleston. Put in writing, here's why we are excluding you. Here's why we don't want you to be in our league. It's not the children. The children in these other teams are not afraid of the kids from Dunbar or from Charleston West Side. They're not saying we don't want to play these teams. So the board members of the Appalachian League, they owe it to the parents and the children from Dunbar and from Charleston, and they owe it to their own parents and their own children. Explain to them why you're doing that. And I would say to the parents of the teams that are participating, particularly the teams from Kanawha County, like Upper Kanawha Valley and all those schools up there, like uh, the, the community up in South Hills, right? Like St. Albans, and now even South Charleston has been invited to participate, and Nitro, and Sissonville, and Elkview. All these teams from Kanawha County have been invited to participate, but Dunbar and Charleston have been excluded. How would the parents in these other communities feel if their children were being excluded from playing? This is unfair. It is unjust. And if you don't like football at all, you ought to be paying attention to this. You ought to pay attention. Children in Dunbar, children in South Charleston, any kids that go to any of those elementary schools in Dunbar, any children go to any of the elementary schools in Charleston, once you, including Kanawha City, Chamberlain, and Kanawha City Elementary, and Chamberlain Elementary, and all the schools on this side of the river, the north side of the river, they are excluded from playing youth football, and our young girls are excluded from cheering. That's not fair. That is unjust for them to be denied that opportunity. Instead, they got to drive clear up to Parkersburg and over into Ohio to play, right? And what I'm saying to the parents and to the coaches and to the commissioners and people, don't accept this. I mean, don't accept this. Don't say, well, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter when you are being treated unfairly. It does matter when you've been treated unjustly. And every time you accept it, it will make it easier for them to treat you unfairly and to treat you unjustly in the future. You have to take a principled position to say this is unfair, this is unjust, and we will do whatever we can do within the law to get this matter corrected. I'm appealing to the board members who make the decision with the Appalachian Football Conference, put it in writing, post it on social media. Here's why we don't want Dunbar and Charleston to participate in our league. Put it out there. If you believe they cheat, then say we think they cheat. If you think the parents are too unruly, too disrespectful, too belligerent, then put it out there. We think they're too unruly, too belligerent, and too disrespectful. Whatever the reasons are, put it out in the public square. And once they do that, I'm saying to the parents and the coaches and the officers of Dunbar and Charleston, look at what they say and ask, is there any truth to it? Is there any truth to the reason they give? This needs to be fully vetted in the public arena. And I'm appealing to people of goodwill. People have been playing sports. One of the first places where blacks and whites worked together and did things together was around sports. Even before desegregation and integration, there'd be teams outside of the school where men would play against each other in softball. And there'd be baseball leagues where there would be a competition that was held. Sports has always been the venue to where people were brought together. So now look at what's happening. At the earliest age, we are reverting back to a tactic during segregation. Schools had been segregated for decades. The Supreme Court decision in 1954, they called for desegregation of public education because separate but equal was constitutionally against the law. So what did they do in West Virginia? As I shared with you earlier, in some parts of West Virginia, they desegregated the high schools and the middle schools, and it's more like they integrated them. They integrate the black students into those schools. Listen to what I'm getting ready to tell you. But they kept the elementary schools separate. They kept them segregated by race. And in the case of my county or Fayette County, they were segregated up until 1966. Keep them separated at the elementary level. Send a signal to elementary school children that there's some difference. They're other, they're different from us. Don't let them come together and play together and work together. Why? Because they might become friends at earlier ages. And they might realize that this whole racial hierarchy is a joke and it's ridiculous. And what is happening here, the Appalachian Youth Football League, it's obvious now with intentionality, they are segregating youth football primarily based on race. Everybody knows that the Dunbar youth football franchise is predominantly African American. Everybody knows that the Charleston Cougar football franchise, both players and cheerleaders and cheerleading coaches and football coaches, is African American. The two predominantly African American youth football franchises are being excluded. And so, without any explanation being given as to why they're being excluded, other than the Appalachian officials have the right to do so. So, where do we go from here? We make the appeal to the Appalachian football franchise leaders. Tell us what the problem is. Tell Dunbar and Charleston what they need to do for you to reconsider and accept them into their league. Dunbar and Charleston, be prepared to respond to that and make every effort to try to meet those requirements so that the children can participate in this county where they need and should be participating to be a part of a solution of moving beyond this. And if the Appalachian League are not willing to do that, here's what I'm suggesting that we need to do. African American parents, ministers, community leaders, political leaders, we need to all come together and go to Kanawha County schools and basically say, if the Appalachian Youth Football League franchise are not going to allow Dunbar and Charleston children to participate, we're asking Kanawha County School Board to place a moratorium on youth football utilizing fields owned by Kanawha County. If Dunbar and Charleston cannot play, are not allowed to play, then we ought to demand that Kanawha County schools shut down youth football on the fields that are owned by Kanawha County schools. Let them go play in a cow pasture. Let them play in their backyard. Let them play at a country club. Let them play at a golf course somewhere that is private and not public. But we ought to demand that they not be allowed to play on fields owned by Kanawha County schools, of which we are also contributors and taxpayers to the maintenance and the upkeep of those facilities. Yes, this is what we ought to do. We need to stop talking about the 47th president of the United States, what he's doing and what he's not doing. We need to look right around us and look to see how our children are being treated. And we're basically saying, well, it's just football. No, it's not just football. It's our children and their parents and their families being denied an opportunity that they ought to have because they are citizens in these United States of America. And if they're going to use publicly funded fields to hold these contests, then it should be open to any community that feels a team and that wants to play and compete. I know a lot of people are going to say, why don't he shut up? I'm not going to shut up on this issue because this is a critical issue. And what I'll say to the ministers and to the preachers, who sometimes can be very critical without really knowing the depth of how complicated an issue are. If we as ministers and if we as preachers basically say, well, I'm not going to get involved in that, then that's just football, and they should be worrying about doing something else, and they're playing football on Sunday, and they shouldn't be playing on football on Sunday. They ought to be in church or Sunday school somewhere. Let me tell you, preacher, something. You keep holding to that position, and keep saying that it's not that important, and then they don't need to be playing football. Don't be surprised when the children, the parents start saying to you, when you invite them to come to Sunday school or church, say, well, it's not really that important, it's not really that relevant, and we don't think that going to Sunday school and church is really that important. We cannot just dismiss what's important to the people. It's not illegal, it's not immoral, it's not indecent for our children to participate in an athletic event. And we coming and preaching and we run in a hurry to get a bit of diction so we can run home and get in front of our television set so we can watch the NFL game. Let's not be duplicit. Let's not be hypocritical, right? Some of us worship at the altar of sports. And so I'm not trying to be mean spirited. I'm trying to rally us to realize we've got to come together around an issue that is clearly defined. The issue is that children from Dunbar and Charleston are being denied the opportunity to participate in youth football in their county where the games are being played on fields owned by Kanawha County Schools, therefore financed and supported by taxpayers' dollars. And that is not fair. And if they're not going to be given the invitation to play, then we need to come together as a community and demand that Kanawha County Schools places a moratorium saying that no football, youth football, can be played on fields that's owned, maintained by Kanawha County Schools until Dunbar and Charleston are invited to participate. That's the position that we ought to take. This is an opportunity for us to take a stand somewhere and come together because we haven't taken a stand since the election in 2024. We haven't taken a stand since the current governor basically issued an executive order and then had his anti-diversity bill passed, Senate Bill 474, that basically eradicates diversity, equity, and inclusion from K through 12 education, higher education, and state government, and that basically eradicate the Equal Employment Opportunity Office that shut down the state's observance for Juneteenth. We haven't taken a position. We haven't said anything. And then we've gone through the second legislative session, nearly, and we haven't said anything about the soft closure of the Herb Henderson Office of Minority Affairs office. I mean, when are we going to take a stand? And I'm saying, so let's take a stand at least to try to ensure that our children are treated fairly, all right? That's my take. That's my take. And if you'd like to talk to me about it, we'd love to do so. Send me a Facebook message. I'll get back with you. Criticize it, critique it. You know, I won't be angry with you. I won't be mad at you because I do think we need to have a conversation. And what we don't need to do is let's not accommodate to the situation. That's what we sometimes do as black people. So we basically will say, well, their league is not that good anyway. Well, there's no competition for us. And so that's our way of accepting it, of accommodating to it without putting up any type of fight. And so we're going to inconvenience parents by having them to make at least 4 trips, and depending on whether they make the playoffs for not, clear up into Parkersburg and over into Ohio. And if these wars in the Middle East heat up, gas already went up 50 cents a gallon. And if these things continue, by the time youth football starts in late August, early September, gas could be $5 a gallon. And that's not an exaggeration. This is not sustainable to expect parents year after year to spend all this money just so those kids can play football in a competitive environment. Well, thank you for your time this evening, and I appreciate your attention. Please repost this, comment on it. Let's create a conversation around how we can come together and take a stand somewhere against something that's unfair and unjust, and how we can build on that one issue and then move to the next issue as well. All right? You guys be blessed. Y'all be encouraged. I appreciate you giving me some of your very, very precious time. I would also extend to you, if you know someone that is looking for a job or trying to find job training, then you can send me a Facebook message at Matthew J. Watts. I can get get their name and contact information to Justin Phillips and Tracy Phillips, to Jawad Thompson, Deanna Beverly. They'll follow up with them. They'll try to help them find employment. They provide them with assistance finding services. If you know someone that's looking for employment, they can just stop by the Grace Bible Church tomorrow. We're having an open employment workshop. You can come in. They have some leads on some jobs. They can help people make applications for them. Just help get the word out. If they come, it'd be helpful if they would bring some information like their birth certificate, their Social Security card, proof of residency, because things like that are needed to register them into the system. But they'll be more than glad to work with them and follow up with them and help them get the necessary documentation to be registered in the system and also to be referred for employment. Amen. Be blessed. Thank you for your time, and stay encouraged, stay alert, keep paying attention. God bless you.